It's My Nerd World, a pop culture and Star Wars podcast. On the show this week, I will share with you my non-spoiler review, having just watched Oppenheimer. Will Christopher Nolan, the director of that film, ever go and direct a Star Wars movie? And should he direct a Star Wars movie? I will share with you my opinion. We have some listener feedback this week as well, and another pitch on why you need to be watching Foundation. Thank you so much for checking out this week's My Nerd World.
Nothing will stand in our way.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
I will finish what you started.
Who are you? I'm no one.
There are stories about what happened.
It's true. All of it.
The Force. It's calling to you.
My Nerd World.
Just let it in.
It is My Nerd World, and I'm your host, Jon Justice. Thank you so much for checking out another episode this week. As always, if you want to email me, TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. You can also go to mynerdworld.net, and if you want to support My Nerd World, pick up my EMBARK science fiction space opera series. 7 books at all, available in ebook, paperback, hardcover, and audiobook, where you can follow a ragtag squadron of pilots and one reluctant hero on a journey of survival from Earth to the far reaches of space as they fight for humanity's future among the stars. Unlike Oppenheimer, my books are suitable for those 11 and older, even though it was written for adults. Yes, I was quite surprised at 2 rather explicit sex scenes in Oppenheimer. And not that I wanted to lead off talking about this film in that way, but I also think that it's good to know going into a movie like this, especially since if you're familiar with Christopher Nolan's past work, certainly his most recent slate of films over the course of the past decade or so, that's not typical for him to include explicit scenes the way that he did in Oppenheimer. I will say that I am more of a let's not show everything kind of guy. I don't like a lot of gratuitous scenes in my content. In the film, it's relevant to the story. It's not done. It's done as tastefully as it can be, given the fact that there is nudity and sex occurring in the film. At the same time, for as weird as it is to say, the 2 instances where it takes place in the film, it's incredibly relevant to the storytelling and the depth of character study that we are getting into with Oppenheimer, which is what I wanted to really speak of when talking about this review, having just seen the film a few hours ago. Oppenheimer is one of those movies where I will say it's great, but I walked out very conflicted, not exhilarated. I didn't walk out of the theater going, oh my gosh, that was amazing. It was very similar to the experience that I had the first time seeing one of his other films, Dunkirk, which upon rewatches I appreciate more. Dunkirk was a film that I walked out thinking that was a great film, but I'm not sure if I'd see it again, and yet there is something about Christopher Nolan's movies where you do want to go and consume them again. It's not as accessible as, say, Inception, one of my favorite films. I enjoyed Inception more. I enjoyed the ride of Interstellar, Inception, and to a certain extent, Tenet. I think that Oppenheimer is a better movie than Tenet. But in terms of going on a ride, Tenet is certainly a film where you go on a ride. This is more of, again, a character study. I'm not sure exactly what I was expecting going into Oppenheimer. Perhaps something more along the lines of a straight point A to point B building of the bomb right? No spoilers here. I do feel it's important, though, and helpful for me to give a bit of the way the movie is laid out, so perhaps you'll be more prepared than I was. I've heard other reviewers doing something similar. I'm not going to give away anything in terms of plot, because there were quite a few things within the story that I was rather surprised to learn. There is a political thread that runs through the film where, if you're familiar with Robert Oppenheimer, this will not come as a surprise to you. Knowing, and when the film started, immediately being thrust into this particular era, and then being introduced to the conflicts as it relates to the politics of the time, specifically communism, I was very sort of, oh, wow, okay, I wasn't aware of this, but at the same time, I wasn't really thinking in terms of the time period and how this would be very relevant. This would be a theme that will carry itself throughout the film. Factual, not agenda-driven, but very interested to see what other people have to say about that aspect of the film. The movie itself plays out in essentially 3 parts over its very long 3 hours. I will say that the only time the 3 hours felt that way was when you get into the very last, say, 40 minutes of the film. And at no point was I wanting the film to end, but the way that the story is told in its 3 parts, by the time you get to the end of the film, you are into something much more akin to a drama. The middle portion of the movie, I think, is probably best portrayed by the trailers. Watching the trailers, if you go watch Oppenheimer and you just watch the middle hour, that's exactly what you would have expected. The first 45 minutes to an hour and the last hour was definitely not what I expected. It is very much a movie that challenges its viewer. Christopher Nolan does not hold your hand. There's about 3 and then 4 different timelines running through the film that we are cutting from. If you're paying attention, you can absolutely follow it. Christopher Nolan does a good job of making sure to give the viewer the ability to differentiate what time period you're in. But like with all Christopher Nolan movies, he makes you do the work. He's not going to hold your hand. He's going to make you think, and it's going to take you a moment to go, oh, okay, we're now in this period of time. Now, some of it's very obvious. There's a black and white, if you've seen the trailers, black and white portions of the film, and those are portrayed in sort of the latter part of the movie, even though those moments take place throughout the film. The first hour of the movie, there's a lot of very quick cuts. If you're familiar with Nolan's work, he has a very unique editing style. Whether it's him giving direction to the editor or him doing the editing himself, I haven't done enough research to tell you. But I will say that it is very indicative of the way that Nolan has cut other films. I'll point to The Dark Knight as a very good example. And a moment in the movie that you probably will remember, but after the party scene at Batman's home, at Bruce Wayne's home, when the Joker shows up, and we get the moment where Batman jumps out the window to save the damsel in distress right after Joker drops her from the window. He catches her as she's falling. He unleashes his cape, and they drop hard to the car below, and she makes the comment of let's not do that again. And then shortly after, you have a quick shot of the Joker hanging his head out like a dog out the side of a squad car. Those moments are very quick. You don't ever get sort of a resolution of what happened to the party. You don't see Batman getting off of the car with the girl. You don't see the Joker getting into the police car or where they were heading. They're all just moments to set the scene and give you enough information to move on to the next scene. The first 45 minutes of Oppenheimer, Christopher Nolan deploys that method of storytelling. And he does it very, very well and very, very effectively. This is a story about Oppenheimer. And I suppose that's obvious, given that's the title of the film. For myself, and this may not have been for everybody, I was expecting more of it being, like I said, of a through line of building the bomb, with the culmination of the film being the unleashing of the bomb or the bombs being dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I'm not really spoiling anything, but that is definitely not the case. I really enjoyed the movie. but it's one of those ones where it got me thinking. It reminds me quite a lot like, my apologies. It reminds me quite a lot of going on vacation. You go on vacation, you have a great time, you're happy to get home, and you can reflect back on vacation, and people will ask you, how was vacation? You go, vacation was really good, but you're glad to be home. And for me, a lot of times it takes a while until you can go back and look on vacation, and then eventually you want to go back on vacation, right? Okay, I had my fill of vacation, I can get back to things. That's what this movie feels like. It makes you think. It deserves a Best Picture nod, and if not winning the award, in my opinion. I mean, it is in and of itself a masterpiece. Even though I walked out feeling different than I expected to walk out of the theater. Visually, it's absolutely stunning, but it's a character study, and it's a character study of individuals that are absolutely flawed. There's really no heroes in this film. Not in the same way of like Unforgiven. My father and I have talked about this in the past. There's really no heroes in Unforgiven. You look at Clint Eastwood's character, and he's a very flawed man, right? And in this film, much like life, the characters are very real characters, and they have very real flaws. And you have characters that are side characters that are better than other individuals, but they're not the main characters. And, Oppenheimer is clearly conflicted. I think that's probably the most obvious statement I could make about the film. It does, I don't want to say challenge your convictions. I think we all have our own views and opinions on nuclear weapons, the proliferation of nuclear weapons, and where we are. It is what it is. I don't think that the way that the development of nuclear weapons based off of the the geopolitics of the day could have played out any other way that it did. I believe that everything happens for a reason, but you look back at the choices that these individuals make with regard to doing what they believe is best for the country, and certainly with regard to what they do in their lives. Oppenheimer was an incredibly conflicted and an incredibly human person who made an abundance of mistakes and probably did not have the best view of women and did not respect women the way that he should, not in a abusive way, but having gone through a couple of marriages, as did his wife, his second wife in the film. These are flawed characters, and so you don't really walk away going, yay for whoever. You walk away going, wow, that was the story of Oppenheimer that I was not fully aware of. I was entertained. I'm glad I saw it. I look forward to seeing it again. And it's one of those films that I look forward to other people going to see their reactions. My 21-year-old son, Logan, is very excited to go see this movie. He said he was anticipating this film more than any other film he's ever seen. And he's traveling currently. And I called him because he doesn't have a chance to see it yet. And, I told him, I said, I'm really looking forward to seeing what your thoughts are, because I don't think this is what he expected, especially with Interstellar being his all-time favorite film. The performances are spectacular. It's beautifully shot. Everything that relates to the making of the atomic bomb lives up to the hype. I will say that keep your, the actual going off of the bomb was great, but I think there's a lot of hype around that where Nolan doesn't overdo it. I think he plays it perfectly. Really puts you in the perspective of the individuals of the Trinity test and what they went through. That was my takeaway. He did not film it and present the test, the Trinity test, to wow and amaze audiences. I believe he did it to serve what the characters and the individuals involved must have experienced at the time, which would be far different than what we would think of a Hollywood film and a nuclear bomb going off, an atomic bomb going off for the first time. He was incredibly faithful, I think, to that aspect and the entire aspect of the storytelling. It is definitely a talking movie. A lot of scenes of men walking and talking and men in rooms talking, but still incredibly engaging, thrilling at times, challenging at other times, and enjoyable, but thought-provoking. I really hope that you'll reach out, TalkShowNerd@gmail.com, and let me know what you thought of the film. My wife is going to see it tomorrow because she was unable to go with me this morning to go see it. And I cannot wait to hear what her reaction is, because we often have a difference of opinion when it comes to films like this. And again, I'd love to hear from you. TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. All right, let's move on to some other items.
Something inside me has always been there. But now it's awake. And I need help.
Not a lot going on in the Star Wars universe this week. There is a new Mando-related Lego cartoon special that apparently will be coming out on Disney Plus sometime in the near future. They did release some Ahsoka artwork, some concept art for the series that gets underway in about a month from now. But keeping with Christopher Nolan, he did an interview. I'm looking at an article here from IGN. He was asked several questions, and the answer to some of those questions were revelations from Christopher Nolan following a new interview with French media. He says he will never make a TV series. He no longer wants to make superhero films. He declined to say whether or not he would ever direct a Star Wars film, which was a rather interesting answer. That alone intrigued me, being a fan of Christopher Nolan's work, and with Star Wars being in the place that it's in right now. He says he will still be making films in 10 years. He will never have a TikTok account. It's also not a problem for him to watch films on a phone or a computer, but I believe he doesn't even own a smartphone, which was interesting as well. So, Christopher Nolan directing a Star Wars film. Right now we have an actor and writer strike going on in Hollywood. That's put everything on pause. They were almost finished filming Andor Season 2, and that has been stopped because of the writer and actor strike. And I guess they were down to the last few days of filming. What that means for when we will be seeing Andor Season 2 now, will we get what they shot so far, remains to be seen. I think, as I've talked about on the show, leading into Ahsoka, I think we all know what to expect of the Ahsoka series. I expect it to be good. I expect the quality to be on par with The Mandalorian. It's definitely, again, for lack of a better word, juxtaposition, going and seeing an epic, a film like Oppenheimer on the big screen, and then getting back down to the small screen. Because it just reminds me of how much I want to see my Star Wars on the big screen and the quality to be there. So getting at the question of would I want to see Christopher Nolan direct a Star Wars film? Let's just say, for the sake of argument, that I've got a slate of directors to choose from, and Christopher Nolan was one of them. Would I pick Christopher Nolan? I would absolutely pick Christopher Nolan. I would certainly pick Christopher Nolan over a James Mangold after having seen Indiana Jones Dial of Destiny, which I very much enjoyed, but I'll be honest, that movie didn't stick with me, and I did not have any desire to go back and see it in the theater, where I would go and see Oppenheimer again. Having some distance on Indiana Jones, it made me question whether or not I would want James Mangold, who I very much enjoy as a director, directing a Star Wars film. I know he is supposed to, with this Dawn of the Jedi film taking place thousands or tens of thousands of years before the events of the prequels. I would hope that he would lend his directing style of what he did in Ford versus Ferrari versus what he did in Indiana Jones. I believe in Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, he was trying to go for something that was more in line with the previous Indiana Jones films, which makes sense. And I think it fits with those films. I think with Star Wars, we've got enough movies now and enough variety of films and styles of Star Wars films to where you can definitely separate out. You don't have to go with what we got in the original trilogy, which was certainly what J.J. Abrams did with The Force Awakens, and I believe he did that quite well. The Last Jedi, of course, deviated from that quite a bit, and as I've mentioned many times, I still contend that The Rise of Skywalker, a film that I very much enjoy as a popcorn movie and a Star Wars film, is an interesting combination of The Last Jedi and what JJ did with The Force Awakens. That being said, you go back and you watch the original Star Wars, and I would say that movie is sort of more akin to a directing style of a Christopher Nolan. Something paced a little bit slower and shots a little bit wider, and I'm being very, very vague here, but let me get to my point. It's the care that Christopher Nolan puts into his movies with his particular style and grounding in reality that I would love to see in a Star Wars film. Denis Villeneuve is another director that I would love to see direct a Star Wars film. I would probably want Christopher Nolan directing a Star Wars film before Denis Villeneuve. I think Denis Villeneuve is a masterful director. Arrival, Blade Runner 2049, the first Sicario, Dune, all fantastic films. Star Wars needs a certain energy that I haven't seen Denis Villeneuve put in a lot of his films. There are moments in Dune where we get that. If he were to turn that up a notch and provide a little bit more of that in telling a Star Wars story, I could absolutely see that. And I believe that a Denis Villeneuve would do that. He would pay close attention to keep with what the expectations are of an individual going to see a Star Wars film. Christopher Nolan, though, we know what he's capable of in terms of action. Whether it is the Dark Knight trilogy or Inception or Tenet, to see him provide his level of care and eye in filmmaking to a Star Wars film, I think would be absolutely fantastic. The fact that he declined to say if he would ever direct one tells me that perhaps there were conversations. And to be honest, I would be, well, I'm always honest. Kind of a crutch when I say that, huh? I'll tell you what, I would rather all the ideas currently that Lucasfilm has for the Obey Shinoy post episode 9 film. I know we're going to get the Mandoverse movie, and I'm looking forward to that. And with Dave Filoni directing and a real movie budget, we'll certainly see something that's more suitable for the big screen than what we'll see with Ahsoka. But with the strike going on, who knows when that's going to happen. I would shelve all of those to have the next Star Wars film done by Christopher Nolan. That's what I think the franchise needs. It needs a thoughtful, artful, careful director to write and film the next Star Wars movie. And I know this will probably be controversial, but something akin to what Rian Johnson did. I love The Last Jedi. Watching Oppenheimer and being in a bit of a Star Wars mood, I actually kind of go, you know what, I kind of want to go back and watch Last Jedi right now, because this is a film that definitely had an artistic style presented to it in what Rian Johnson did, and we all know how controversial it was. But I think to bring the franchise back to the big screen for the first time in, you know, what will be 6, 7, 8 years out from Episode 9, to have a Christopher Nolan directed Star Wars movie, knowing that he would also adhere to the expectations of the audience in something similar to what he did with his superhero films. The Dark Knight movies are fantastic. And, you know, the first one in his trilogy, it's more mainstream. Clearly, he did sort of what J.J. Abrams did with The Force Awakens, with Batman Begins, in making something that was a little bit more mainstream. But since that was a hit, you get to The Dark Knight, and I mean, the Dark Knight is one of the best superhero movies ever made. I'd put it up there next to, I mean, they're definitely different from what you get in the Marvel MCU, but it is certainly the best of the DC movies. And I'm also a big fan of The Dark Knight Rises as well. So yes, please, all of this is to say, give me a Christopher Nolan Star Wars movie. I am absolutely 100% here for it.
This is not going to go the way you think.
All right, since we're branching out on the podcast and we're talking about things other than Star Wars, I just want to put another shout out to Foundation. Season 2 started. The second episode in Season 2 is currently awaiting my eyes. Once pizza arrives here at home, we'll probably go and watch it. If you have not watched Season 1 of Foundation on Apple Plus, it is a fantastic series. I absolutely cannot say enough good things about it. Episode 1 of Season 2 was interesting. A little bit different than what I've expected in terms of plot, and I won't ruin anything for you. There were moments of it that I was definitely in for. Other moments that I'm allowing to percolate, if you will, just because it wasn't what I expected. But definitely looking forward to watching season 2. And cannot recommend, if you have not watched season 1, take time to go and watch it, because it is just absolutely fantastic science fiction. Melinda and I also started watching Hijack with Idris Elba on Apple Plus. We kind of been avoiding it. We weren't completely sold on the trailers for it, but watching the first episode, we immediately went to the second episode, and probably would have watched the third if it hadn't been for the fact that it was a work night and I needed to go to bed. So far, 2 episodes in, a very compelling show. And so far, I absolutely recommend it. So that's Hijack, about a plane being hijacked on Apple Plus. An interesting turn of events in the film, though, and in the series, in the way that they handle the different cultures as it relates to the hijacking of planes. That's all I'm going to say. Not controversial, but just an interesting choice. I'm not sure how intentional it was, but if you watch the show, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. So if you're looking for something to stream, I would definitely check that out. The first 2 episodes were very, very compelling.
I need someone to show me my place in all this.
TalkShowNerd@gmail.com is the email address. Got a couple of listener feedbacks this week, and also leave a comment up on YouTube as well. N. Blackie writes, "There's only so much mediocre content you can take before you completely check out. I believe Lucasfilm needs to make a choice on which style they should go all in on. Either the Gilroy realism style or the Filoni-Favreau more comic book campy style. My vote would be to shed the campy old school, tired Star Wars aesthetic and embrace the Gilroy way. It's time for Star Wars to grow up and take itself more seriously. It may take time to take hold, but I believe if they lean into more of the same, Star Wars goes the way of the Muppets. No one will care about it." Yeah, I find myself, even to the point where I've changed the podcast now to make it more of a pop culture and Star Wars podcast, simply because of, I don't want to say my love of Star Wars has waned, but I find myself being drawn to other science fiction. I believe the trailer for Rebel Moon finally dropped. I just now was reminded of that. I think there was this was the Zack Snyder space opera that was originally intended to be a Star Wars. He wanted it to be a Star Wars product. I saw some tweets that were doing a big event, but I haven't had a chance to go online and to see, so I'll definitely be checking that out when the show is over. But I know that I just don't have the same excitement right now for upcoming Star Wars content as I did before, and it just goes to what N. Blackie was saying, and thank you for the message. I've kind of been burned now, and it hasn't been all that great. And again, we haven't had Star Wars films, and to me, Star Wars needs to be on the big screen, but I just keep saying that. So, Ray 2017 says, "At this point in time should be Disney's best friend. If we need to have a few extra years for the Lucasfilm team to craft out the best and the great stories, the movies and movies ever, then so be it. I don't want okay movies. I want great movies like The Last Jedi level of good and great." Well, and at this point, it looks like everybody's going to have to wait for a lot of content, simply because this writer and an actor strike doesn't seem like it's going to be ending anytime soon. And the studios, quite honestly, don't need it to end soon. Right now, they're bleeding money. You go back and look at Raiders of the Lost Ark, and its initial budget when adjusted for inflation was about $28 million. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny cost $300 million to make. Raiders of the Lost Ark is a far superior film. Far superior film. And they haven't even made the money back yet on Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. So right now, this strike going on is the best thing for studios. You've got Disney Plus bleeding money for Disney. Max, you've got bleeding money. Amazon and Apple Plus are doing okay because they have their secondary products. They have their hardware and Apple products, right? They can lean back on, so they can afford to lose money because they're not making money on the streaming services either. Amazon has Amazon Prime to lean back on. So we're going to end up in a situation that we had during COVID, where there's going to be a stoppage of content being made. We'll get an abundance of content, as we typically would, along all genres and styles now for a little while. And then it's going to dry up, and we're going to see a rash of reality shows that people that these studios will produce until content starts being made again. And the studios are going to be fine with this because they're going to be saving money in the process. It's unfortunate, but, thankfully there's plenty of content out there. And there are still movies that'll be coming out that, like I said, that we'll be able to enjoy. But I think all of this is just going to throw a monkey wrench into any plans that they may have had for the Star Wars films, and that's probably all going to change. And honestly, good. I'm kind of with Ray 2017 at this point in time. Put something good out. If it means that you scrap all these other ideas for these, I know we're going to get the Mandoverse for sure, but given how Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny turned out, I could see Disney going, James Mangold, we're not going to do that. And depending on this Ray post Episode 9 film with the strike, the longer time goes on, the more time people have to think about this stuff. So it still remains to be seen. But listen, if you need entertainment, go buy a book. If you like science fiction, treat yourself, a friend, or a family member to science fiction with EMBARK. 7-book series in all, ebook, hardcover, paperback, and audiobook. You can pick up EMBARK Book 1 today in ebook for just 99 cents. The entire box set of all 7 books in ebook is available for just $3.99. You just got to go to Amazon.com and search for Jon Justice and EMBARK. Taftgardia picked the right day to upgrade his ship after fellow pilot Kate Amaro received a cryptic message from her late aerospace engineer father. What he thought was a routine investigation quickly turns into a dangerous journey of discovery and survival when an industrial accident sets off an apocalyptic chain of events. As a corporate madman with an armada at his disposal attempts to gain control of the global evacuation, they discover what may be the only hope of stopping him. The clock is ticking as Taft, Taketha, and a ragtag squadron of pilots fight to save Earth's evacuees from annihilation and secure their future among the stars. If you like your science fiction space opera to be epic, filled with some romance and action, and great for ages 11 plus, but written for adults, then EMBARK is perfect for you. Available on Amazon or at mynerdworld.net. And if you want to purchase paperbacks directly from me, I'll autograph them for free. Shipping is cheaper. I've got a whole box filled. Just email me, talkshownerd@gmail.com, and let me know which books you want, and I will give you the instructions on how you can purchase them directly from me. I get them shipped out usually within a day or two, so you can usually get them in about less than a week. I've already shipped out several copies already. So talkshownerd@gmail.com if you're looking to pick up a paperback of any of the 7 books in the series or all 7 books in the series. Just email me, talkshownerd@gmail.com. Want to hear your thoughts on Oppenheimer? So again, email me, and I'll share those next week on the show. Until then, I hope wherever you are happy, you are healthy, and you are safe. I'll talk to you then. Bye.
The Force will be with you, always.
My Nerd World.